Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
Welcome back to another edition of Real Answers with Christopher Anderson. Wednesdays, during the Noon Report, we tackle the tough topics facing today's families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. And, well, Chris, as we all know, the holidays are fast approaching, and today's subject is a tough one for many parents, and that being, what do you do when you have a prodigal son or daughter, and through little or no fault of your own, they have distanced themselves from you?
The holidays can be a really tough time for so many people, probably no thanks to all the idealistic holiday movies that are out there and our unrealistic expectations of the holidays as well. But it is very, very difficult for certain groups of people, those that have lost a loved one, and then, of course, the second one that we're going to focus on today, those parents that have a child or children who have decided to distance themselves from their parents, not necessarily the fault of the parents. So what do parents do in these cases?
So, Chris, can you give us a little background?
Sure. As a counselor, I've worked occasionally with people who are either those prodigals themselves or they are the parents in these types of situations. And every situation, of course, is going to be a little different, and nobody is perfect. Neither the parents nor the children are going to be 100% perfect in these types of cases. But in cases where the parents really are at a loss for what has happened, this can be especially painful for those parents when they just try to make sense of the situation and try to understand why their child or their adult children, and often the spouses of those children as well, just will not communicate or have anything to do with the parents. This can be a very painful situation to be in. And again, with the holidays approaching, an even more difficult time.
Well, you said that every case is different, and it is pretty easy to understand why this is true. But what are some of the dynamics or background of cases like this? Are there any similarities?
I think there are, Brandon, and one of the similarities that really every single person is susceptible to is pride. So in situations where families are separated, there is usually, if not always, some element of pride at work. So when one or both of the parties are unwilling to come to the table and really face the role in the division of the family, of course, when there's no extreme circumstances like abuse in the background or other issues which clearly are the cause of the division, then we can assume there's at least some element of pride that may be keeping the reconciliation process from truly happening. And another common factor, Brandon, may be miscommunication or misunderstanding or just difficulty communicating. So this, combined with pride, may be a very difficult factor to work through. But again, it's a common dynamic found in many of these situations. Of course, in these prodigal situations where it involves a younger person, a teenager, for example, there's the challenges that come with just simply navigating the sometimes turbulent waters of raising a teenager as well. So again, the factors that are at work in any given situation also interact with the specifics of the situation and the family's own traits to make that situation complex and somewhat painful to work through. But again, we're not talking about cases where there's a very clear cause, for example, abuse or some sort of very traumatic situation within the family. We're talking about families where the parents are just really uncertain as to what truly happened.
So what can families do when they are truly seeking reconciliation and restoration of the relationship with their loved one?
Great question, Brandon, and also a difficult one, quite honestly, to address, since, again, there's so many factors in play. And again, each case is so different. But one thing is to make sure that your heart is ready to forgive. The lesson of the prodigal son in the Gospels, as Jesus taught us, is just so full of wisdom and lessons for all parties involved. This can be a challenge, and is also why making sure our hearts are right with Christ is so important, because there can be a lot of pain and hurt that families have endured in situations like this, which truly does warrant the Holy Spirit's working in our hearts to really allow that reconciliation process to take place on both sides. So parents can also continue to, again, love your kids, send notes, packages during holidays and birthday times, and just monitor the situation. Be careful not to overdo it either. Of course, that can backfire and push people further away. And it is truly a very fine line to walk when it comes to attempting to interact with children that have distanced themselves. So if a prodigal son or daughter or a family begins to respond to communication attempts, and just allow the process to unfold, and potentially that child or children may be willing to open up to a meeting with the parents, or maybe even with a third-party mediator like a counselor or a social worker to help facilitate the process of restoration. But again, in all cases, bathe the process in prayer. And then parents, you need to make sure that you're being supported yourselves by friends and or a counselor.
Once again, you've been listening to another edition of Real Answers with Christopher Anderson. Wednesdays, during the Noon Report, we tackle the tough topics facing today's families with Christian counselor Christopher Anderson.